Let me kick things off here with a big welcome to everyone. Welcome to 2021, what is shaping up to be the year of the platform, and a great and exciting year for all of us. We're just so thrilled that you've joined us today for what is going to be clearly a very timely discussion about platform professionals, who they are, the roles that they play, also the emergence of educational options for individuals and organizations that are investing in platform careers and talent development pathways. And just a quick reminder that this is our first monthly installment in a great conversation about all things platform. We hope that you'll plan to join us each month as we delve into a discussion of key issues and themes influencing the platform arena. Before we dive into some quick introductions today, we want to just share a quick stat that may help set the stage for the importance of this discussion and this community. So again, the stat is on the page, but just a quick context for everyone's reference. In November 2020, a survey was conducted of about 100 platform companies, and that survey confirmed their collective market cap of over $12 trillion. And that represented a tripling of their collective market value in less than 5 years. This phenomenon has motivated a surge in startup companies, as well as activity from incumbent organizations to explore platform moves for themselves. So we're seeing a real renaissance in business model innovation. It's an exciting time. There are a lot of experiments, a lot of different derivatives of these models. And kind of the world is, the platform businesses are on the global stage right now. And, you know, nothing, I think, drives that point home more acutely than recent events in the U.S. political and commercial arena, as really a stark example of the power of platform models and reach. Really, whether you are building a platform, scaling one, partnering with platforms, or even competing with platforms, today every organization absolutely needs to have platform professional expertise in their talent development plan. So with that, I think it's a great time to be having a conversation about platforms and platform professionals. We've done an extraordinary amount of research in this area, and it's a great time to introduce our speakers. Today, we're joined by my partners at the Platform Strategy Institute, Geoff Parker. Geoff, if you can give us a little wave. Geoff Parker is professor of engineering at Dartmouth College, where he also serves as director of Master of Engineering Management Program, and he's also a visiting scholar at MIT Sloan and a research fellow at the Initiative on the Digital Economy, where he leads platform industry research studies.
Hey, Diane. Hi, everyone. Really glad to see you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Geoff. And Geoff and Marshall have co-authored The Platform Revolution, which is my go-to research, and I know I'm in good company there. Most of the professionals I collaborate with, this is their go-to book on their credenza. But Marshall Van Alstyne with us. Marshall, give us a wave. Marshall is one of the world's experts on networked business models and is chair professor at the Boston University Sloan School of Business. Marshall and Geoff are internationally recognized platform experts, advising, researching, and providing thought leadership for all of us that are invested in this arena. And so we're so fortunate to have them join us today. And then
I hate to say it, Geoff and I have been writing on this stuff for 20 years, so it's just a little while.
these guys literally wrote the book on platform business. So we're really fortunate. With that as context, no pressure, but we're hoping to see some really great questions in the chat window today that we can dive into in the second half. Also joining us today, hopefully, is our partner and co-conspirator in all things platform, Peter Evans, who is also a fellow GE alumni. A few of us are, and Peter has over 20 years of experience leading teams in identifying, framing, assessing, and communicating high priority marketplace trends. He is a change maker and really a thought leader on so many arenas. And we're fortunate to have his perspective today. He is always challenging the status quo and helping us with horizon watching in the platform space. So Peter will be diving into the discussion with us today. And then I'll be your host, your MC, and the page turner for the conversation today. I'm Diane Finkhausen. I am a partner in the Platform Strategy Institute. I spent about 24 years at GE on a number of connected initiatives. So first connected cars, connected equipment with the IoT rollout, and then most recently connected experts, spending 10 years building expert ecosystems to support the needs and the priorities of GE businesses and their clients. So I have been deeply invested in and passionate about the world of ecosystems and platforms. And I'm excited to join the Platform Strategy Institute and join this discussion today. So there's Peter. Hey, give us a wave, Peter.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. It's fantastic to have an opportunity to share some of new research that we've been doing on this concept of platform professionals. We're in an era, everybody understands that we're digitizing, but digitization isn't necessarily, it's the context, but we believe, and we'd like to share with you kind of what companies are actually out there in the market looking for. And we started digging into this and we're surprised by how many roles are actually very focused on seeking to hire and bring into the organizations people with deep platform expertise. And so we've undertaken a fairly sizable study in which we looked at over 11,000 job roles to try to distill that and understand what the trends and patterns are with respect to this kind of new category of key strategic leader in the company. And we'll break out sort of what those roles are because they serve a variety of different functions and they cut across multiple segments or kind of industries, right? We're talking not just about, the tech companies, but also healthcare, banking, insurance, entertainment. There's a whole media, there's a whole variety of sectors that are now looking to platform professionals to help drive growth and change in their organizations.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That's great context and good to reference back to as we work through the content today. So thank you for that, and thanks for joining us. So as I mentioned, just a quick housekeeping note before we dive in. We are recording this session today. For folks that have recently joined, we will be recording the session today and making that recording available to you online to our YouTube channel and our website. We'll send that link out when those are available. So please keep that in mind. Please definitely use this chat window. We're looking for a great discussion, interactive discussion in the second half of the hour. We're hosting an Ask Me Anything session in the second half of the hour. So queue up all of those questions and ideas that you have in the chat window. And then really, the only other housekeeping note is, once again, we will be conducting these discussions monthly. So the next monthly session will be on February 10th at 10 a.m. ET. So keep an eye out for those invitations and announcements. We'd love to have you join us all year long. With that, let's dive in. I'd like to hand it off to Geoff. Geoff, can you share some perspective with us about the forces that are driving the demand for platform professionals?
Yeah, absolutely, Diane. So, and thank you for all that setup. So, if you kind of step way back and just think about the forces on the technology side around, information systems, computational technology, communications technology, that was all setting the stage. And I think what we've seen is a steady progression over the last 5, 10, 20 years of firms, first of all, learning how to deploy and use that technology. But then I think realizing that the business models are actually quite different once you deploy, especially this foundational horizontal technology, that you can then build point solutions and deploy services and products against at scale, and then harnessing both kind of internal capabilities, reusable technology, but importantly, external capabilities, and people who can come and attach to the systems. And I think the success and logic of that has become clearer than ever over the last, say, 5 years. We're all kind of used to talking about the tech giants, and they've just exploded. And I think been able to harness these kind of forces better than almost anybody else. So that leaves everybody else asking the question, okay, well, what are the boundaries between the tech giants and my business and my organization? How do I play ball and use those technologies effectively while not getting just absorbed? And so that suggests the need to understand, sort of both what those technology capabilities are, but critically, what the business logic is. How do I interact and dance with the giants without necessarily getting sort of subsumed? And I think if you just think about the past year, COVID has given us an almost perfect storm of disruption. And then if you look at those firms that have weathered that disruption, many of them have these more distributed kind of platform business models and have proven to be particularly nimble in their ability to kind of match supply and demand when both the supply side is getting disrupted and the demand side is changing and becoming highly variable. And so the platform models that had more fluid supply chain structures have proven to be very successful in the face of that disruption. So I think all of those things come together where firms are now, it's crystal clear that an understanding of those forces is really important on a go-forward basis. So that's enough. I'll hand it off to Marshall for the next slide.
Probably easier a little bit unmute here. So there are a couple of different thoughts on education platforms. So, what is it about platform professionals, or how is it that firms are appropriating some of this background? I've actually been involved in a couple of major efforts to teach these. One is a free course on edX, where one can actually take it. And we have several chapters of the book and several content. For those of you that are interested, we can actually post the slide from most of the chapters of that book so that you have them available. So it's easy to try to get some of the skills from that. But also at a higher level, firms such as Siemens or SK Telecom or some of the large banks are now actually implementing entire programs around this content in order to give their executives, one, a common vocabulary. How is it you describe platforms? Two is a set of tools. How are you designing the platform? How is it you're actually going to manipulate it? And three, also, what's your role in the platform ecosystem? Are you doomed to be a product, or you could be a partner on a platform, or could you actually be the platform itself? And how would you make those kinds of choices? So those are the kinds of things that some of the large organizations are seeking to do over time. We'll also talk about some of the regulatory issues among platforms. There's some interesting challenges. If we talk about co-opetition, for example, as you work together with competitors, when do you run afoul of the law? The Sherman Antitrust Act requires that you not work with competitors. You might be setting prices, you might be carving up the market. Matter of fact, in Europe, if you work with competitors, you could be subject to 10% of your gross sales in penalty, not just net, but gross sales. So how do you navigate that? What are the techniques for doing that? These are all the kinds of things that the platform professionals need to be able to handle as they choose and set up the jobs and disseminate the skills within the organizations. We'll come back to this during the AMA. Also, for those of you that are interested, very happy to go into questions about regulating platforms or content manipulation, fake news, and antitrust on platforms. I think those are some other things happy to discuss in the Ask Me Any portion. I believe that there are also several startups in the audience that had questions about running their organizations or making choices about that. So happy to field questions on those as we come to the open question portion of today. So with that, let's hand it over to Peter. Peter, I think you're on mute.
Yep. So as I mentioned, we've done a sizable analysis of over 11,000 job roles, and from that we distilled sort of patterns of key roles that we see popping up time and again. One of those are for platform strategists. So there are jobs that are dedicated, and organizations are looking for people to help them map out. So this is kind of a road mapping. It's a role that requires bringing the organization together in a common vision for how they want to play out their platform strategy. It also involves competitor analysis to understand what their competitors are doing. So it's kind of a classic strategy role, but it requires deep understanding of how platforms work and helping the organization set that strategy. We also have lots of jobs for platform product managers. You know, some companies actually have multiple platforms, and so they're looking for people who will take responsibility. And this is a complex role that requires working with the engineering team, working with the marketing teams. You know, and in any product role, you have these complex issues, but you have this added issue of also trying to create value outside the boundaries of the firm. And that's another key attribute of a platform professional is that they're constantly looking for not just how you create value inside the firm, but how you build that ecosystem, right? So platform product managers are pretty common. Another are ecosystem managers. These are people dedicated to building those external communities. They come in different names, so they're not all called platform ecosystem managers. Sometimes they're community managers, and there's a variety of other names. But these are folks that have been hired or organizations are looking to help manage that. One area that is very popular now are these third-party developer ecosystems, where you're not having all those software engineers internally, but you're tapping into an external ecosystem. And very large industrial companies now, like Honeywell and Siemens and GE and others, are looking to help build up those external ecosystems to mirror what some of the big tech companies have so successfully done. There's also another role, which is platform engineering. These are the folks that build that technology stack and keep it operating. And I think, as everybody knows on this call, there's some platforms that are truly fantastic in size and scale. So recently, Netflix, for example, posted a really interesting role of leading their platform engineering team. And so there would be dozens of people that they would be responsible for managing and keeping that very, very large platform operating. So those platform engineering roles are internal organizational roles, but they're really designed to capture that value of that and all of the facilitation of communities and engagement with customers that the platform needs to be that double-sided or sometimes multi-sided marketplace. And then you also have platform data management. You know, big data and data analysts are a very, popular job now. Lots of organizations are looking for those people, but there's a kind of another class of roles that we're seeing for people who understand the techniques, and how to use Python and SQL Server and some of these other database, but also are able to understand how you collect the data, how you make that system work from a data perspective because of the value that can be created from data capture, process, and analysis, and the feedback mechanisms that can drive those network effects that really make those platforms powerful. And then finally, as everybody I think is aware, the regulatory environment under which platforms operate is changing. And so we're now beginning to see roles pop up where companies are hiring dedicated people. Sometimes they're looking for people with strong legal backgrounds who understand the legal regimes, but also just coordination people that understand government, can track what's happening from a regulatory standpoint, and really bring that and be, the point person for coordinating all of the compliance, privacy, and trust that is associated with maintaining the operations of the client, platform, so it's compliant. But as we know, the regulatory landscape is constantly changing. So what the platform engineers build today, they need to have an eye towards what the regulatory regime is going to be tomorrow, so that they're building things that are compliant with that. So those are some of the big key roles, and then we're going to dig into a couple of examples for each one of these roles, so you can see exactly what organizations have posted as jobs recently.
Yeah, so super kind of framing there, Peter, because don't just take our word for it. Let's look and see what the firms actually say in their own words. So the first example that kind of populates Peter's strategy slice, if you will, of the pie is Charles Schwab. And so they've announced that they're hunting for a director of platform strategy. And as Peter laid out, it's just exactly what you might think. So the director will work closely with internal and external partners developing strategies to address changing industry trends. The director will work with third-party platforms, ETFs, managed accounts, annuities and insurance, and alternate investments. So if you think about that role, it's clearly at the agenda setting, it's at the partnership creating, it's very much of a board-facing senior management role, because you've got to be able to explain the strategy to the people who will help fund the various initiatives in pretty clear and simple terms. So it's not sort of diving down into the technology weeds, but it's really making the business case of why would we, for example, cross-sell competitor products? What's the logic? Because all of the large kind of finance houses are doing this. So clearly they've made the determination that controlling customer interface is more important than necessarily providing all of the investment products. So that's automatically, you can see an ecosystem strategy playing out there. So that's a strategy role. Dan, could you click forward? Now let's take a look at a product management role. So people are familiar with Airbnb as a provider of housing. And interestingly, they've done remarkably well in the COVID disruption, where, say, a Marriott lost close to 2/3 of their business. Airbnb's revenue was only down about 18%. And so that suggests that they were able to pivot in a more interesting way as the demand pattern shifted from kind of episodic tourist types of visits to sort of roving young professionals who are sampling the cities of the world because they all discovered that they can move around monthly and work remotely. So that's kind of the traditional business, and their platform model allowed for them to pivot. But what's interesting here is that the experiences business is opening up a whole new product line. And the idea there is that every locale has something interesting. They might be private chef experiences, they might be tours, they might be art and painting classes. You name it, the idea is, how would you aggregate such a small and varied long tail of sort of small businesses? And that's exactly what they're doing here. And then they've got a ready pool of demand of travelers who can take advantage of that. And that's a much higher margin business. And so if you kind of dig in and you say, okay, well, what would you need to know how to do? Well, a lot of it is exactly what you would expect for product management. It's about developing metrics and goals. It's about putting together product roadmaps, building alignment across teams, and then working with cross-functional partners. So it's sort of product management 101, if you will, in terms of roadmap setting, but within this platform context, and then leveraging resources and demand availability that the platform provides. So again, it's sort of a little bit of what's old, but layered on top of what we would argue is quite new.
Right. And just to jump in for a second, Airbnb has done more than 1 million transactions in this space already. So this is not just a small little endeavor. This is a major new line of business. And actually, the person who got this job was a former very senior executive at Disney, and she's now running this product business.
Dan, I think you're next up.
Yeah, great context on these moves and these roles and how these are beginning to shape kind of dynasties within industry and macro trends. So our next role archetype is the ecosystem leader. And as Peter rightly noted previously, this role in particular takes form with many different titles. Right, we might see titles that reference kind of developer relations or partnerships or alliances, community engagement, but the role objectives of this role are universal, and they are very tightly focused on the extension and acceleration and expansion of the organizational reach and intellectual capacity. So ecosystem leaders within organizations play a pivotal role. They you'll see a lot of interplay between the responsibilities of this role and the other archetypes that we're discussing. You've heard ecosystem referenced in the previous archetypes, but the collaboration between this individual and the rest of the platform team is absolutely essential. The ecosystem leader is going to be fundamentally focused on building an operation and a network for the organization that reduces operational friction and reduces the friction in the value delivery to the markets that the organization serves. An ecosystem leader will be fundamentally responsible for understanding the strategy and the operations and the aspirations of the organization, and then translating that strategy into a network of collaborators. Importantly to note that those stakeholders will be internal to the organization, but also very importantly outside of the organization, so that the ecosystem can contribute seamlessly to the delivery of value to the markets that they mutually serve. So this role will necessarily be closely connected to the API strategy of the organization, because that is basically the infrastructure for the data that will flow between the organization and its network of partners within its ecosystem. This is a great example. Hopefully you've had a chance to glance through the detail here, but this is just one great example of an ecosystem role. JP Morgan has really been doing very impressive work in systemic hiring for platform professionals. We've enjoyed watching the way that they're shaping their strategy and their organizational design for platform professionals, and this is just another great example of one of the roles that they have implemented in that platform strategy for their organization. Financial services has really shown great activity in the platform space, and we're seeing data and digital solutions really driving the evolution of the customer experience in that sector. And with that, I'll pass it on to, let's see who's next. We've got Geoff.
Yeah, so to continue that theme of financial services, Diane, I think you're exactly right. And so Refinitiv is the Thomson Reuters Finance and Risk Group, for those of you who sort of think about aggregating a lot of different feeds of data, primarily to power things like trading. Full disclosure, I think I was involved in an operation that had maybe 80 licensed seats for the Thomson Reuters Icon when I used to work at Tulane, and we had a whole trading desk, and there were strong technology partners. And at the time, they had a much more enterprise type of product. They had something called the Thomson Reuters enterprise platform that was really the way that they would aim data feeds, but it didn't have the same kind of modularity that you would expect in a modern technology system. It was much more of the variety that you would back up a bunch of servers and then put them in a room and kind of hard code everything. So that logic has evolved considerably, and you can see that in their hiring program. And so here they're looking for clearly a veteran, 10 years of relevant experience. And if you think about some of the jobs of trying to make things more modular, which in effect is what application programming interfaces do, they talk about defining the platform requirements for API services. But I think at a higher level, there's a bit of strategy around the technology. They talk about the need to define the standards and rules for platform APIs and define the engagement principles and services needed to integrate content, analytics, and services to the program. And I know Marshall will talk about this a bit later, but you can start to see the overlap of the technology with the governance in the sense of being able to make really strong definitions of what the participants can do and to do that in a coherent and logical way. And so I think that's it's an important evolution, and you would expect particularly a firm like Bloomberg, a firm like Thomson Reuters, now Refinitiv, to start to think more along that horizontal logic of exposing assets through APIs. So with that, I think I'll pass it back to Peter to talk about Visa.
Okay. So as I mentioned, privacy compliance, that kind of role is popping up. And surprise, surprise, Facebook is out in the market looking for someone to fill that. I think this is self-explanatory, but just another indication that they are looking for these kinds of capabilities. And they do require technical knowledge, but also linked to an understanding of how platforms operate. So it's a new class of interesting career opportunities. And for other companies thinking about how to come into compliance, roles that they may need to create sooner than later. Okay, do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah, I think this is Marshall.
Okay, well, let me jump into a few things there. So one of the things that we actually have been having to work about is especially on the regulatory side and on the governance. As I mentioned, in regulation, working with competitors can actually get you afoul of the law. And as most of you know, the Department of Justice in the United States, the US subcommittee on the antitrust, and the Europeans have all filed antitrust suits against the major platforms. So folks are having, as they run platforms, to actually start thinking carefully about how they do interact with competitors. That's one element of it. Another element of it is, how is it you orchestrate the platform itself? We define a platform as an open architecture with rules of governance to facilitate interactions. The open architecture is what lets third parties in. The rules of governance is what motivates them to add value. And interactions is what creates that value. Often underappreciated is the variety of tools that you have in governance. A lot of managers don't necessarily understand how much that you can influence that using a number of different tools. So one of them, I like to borrow the framework of constitutional law scholar Lawrence Lessig. So you can look at 4 different ways of orchestrating the ecosystem. And each of these has roles that need to be hired in this platform managers. One of them is the rules of the ecosystem. That would be the traditional laws. What's the end user license agreement? How do you set up the rules of what your partners can and cannot do? The second is the pricing mechanism. What are your costs? How do you set prices? How do you set your tariffs and taxes? What royalty rates are you going to be charging in there? Another is going to be the architecture in that. This is the APIs. I think it's underappreciated the extent to which technology is strategy. That helps to determine how open your ecosystem is, who can be a partner, how different parties can access your data or not. And then the last one, of course, is culture. What is it that users do on your ecosystem? How is it they treat one another? And this can be true, it's especially true in B2C context, but can also be true in B2B context, whether or not there's exploitation or fair contracting in there. So the number of these different roles or elements of it, I think, are often underappreciated in what it is that's going on in the ecosystem. I also want to invite each of you to reach out in different ways. So, Peter and Diana especially concocted an amazing database, and you can use this either if you're a major organization hiring in and what should you be looking for, or if you personally are looking to land a platform job, this database is extremely valuable to you in terms of, well, what are companies looking for? What skills do you need? That brings us, I think, to the next section. Diana, advance. I think we've then got training as another element of all of this. So where are you going to find training? What are the educational opportunities? It is interesting. There's another part of this study. You'll actually find there's an enumeration of where are the training programs. Here, Peter's collected a fantastic set of data on different training portions around the world, and whether these are full degree programs, or these are executive education programs, or whether these are vendor specific programs, such as ones that might be led by Salesforce or Microsoft or others in the ecosystem. I happen to have one of the largest ones. I think we've got something like 20,000 students that have been through the platform training program on edX. It's a huge program. You can go through it free under platform strategy, or you can get a certificate for something as cheap as $400. You don't get the interactivity in those programs, but that's one that you can actually go through. Geoff has a nice program on Emeritus. It's a bit more expensive, but you can actually get nice training through there. Or we design specialty programs. We've actually been through a remarkably rigorous program designed for Siemens, where the top 200 executives are each getting individualized training in groups of 50. And then this is going to be propagated out throughout the entire organization. Personally, I think they're adopting platform strategies well enough. Their stock will probably go up. So I think that'll be a very good illustration of this. But if you are looking for educational opportunities, there are a number of different possibilities and ways to do this. And that also is another factor inside the report. Take us to the next slide. So, a couple of different things in here. I don't know if Peter wants to jump into this. We've got a number of different elements on tapping experts. Where are you going to find the expertise? It turns out a lot of organizations try to hire them from existing platform firms. Or can you grow them in-house? How are you actually going to do this? Building critical mass in that. We find, interestingly enough, in order to get these projects successful, you either need an internal team that's completely dedicated, or you may need an external skunk works. You may need to move it outside the organization. If you had too much friction on the internal organization, the business transformation process can be problematic, because you may have the processes for creating internal value compared to the processes for creating external value. The inverted firm are so different that internal organizational antibodies might actually make it difficult to move forward in the transformation. So you may need to establish robust pipelines and establish this could be inside or outside the organization. We're a little bit of a cold in there. Happily, it's not COVID, but do have a bit of a cold. Okay, as we move on to the next slide. Peter, why do you want to speak to the report itself?
Yeah, so we've taken this analysis and compiled a synthesis of the analysis. It's a pretty detailed walk through what those jobs were, the frameworks, what makes a platform professional different from kind of your garden variety manager. And we do believe there are capabilities and kind of knowledge that do distinguish platform professionals from regular professionals, and those are becoming more desired in the market as organizations are trying to build. And in fact, I'm coming to the view that we're getting to a stage where vendors now can build these marketplaces and platforms much more quickly than they could in the past. And so the technology side is getting to the place where you can do it really quickly. The constraint now is more on the management and talent side, right? Where, who runs these, who does all, the coordination, the road mapping, the, strategizing, that kind of, those folks are becoming scarcer. Anyway, so this report is now available on our website, and you can go and check it out. So very happy to have that out. Also, we're building a tool or a resource that provides a way to really understand what external training and executive education programs are available. Geoff and Marshall both described the courses that they offer, but there are now courses available in Europe and in Asia, around the world. The challenge has been finding them. They're not necessarily easy to find. And so we're building out a resource that will make it easier to find. There's one actually kicking off this weekend at MIT. There's another one coming up in India. So there's a lot of activity in this space. But as we look through the job roles and what companies are looking for, I think there's also some opportunities to explore ways in which new offerings could be made available. So for example, there's really no course on platform ecosystem manager. And that's a big role, and a lot of companies are looking for that. So there's an interesting opportunity, I think, for universities and others that are offering platform training and development to really understand what companies are looking for and develop new offerings in this space.
Okay, thanks, Peter. A lot of great development in the platform arena. We're seeing the emergence of just brilliant businesses and business models, exciting new career trajectories and pathways. And also we're seeing really high value educational opportunities and channels opening up to support the emergence of this new market phenomenon. So I know we shared a lot of information with you, and we'll look forward to an ongoing discussion with you as the months ensues. But we'd like to take this time and really just open up the mic for your questions, your ideas, your thoughts. We'll do our best to harness the questions in the chat window here and direct them to the team for response and dialogue.
So I'm going to jump in for a second and invite you in the audience. You're welcome to either post a question in the chat or to unmute yourself in a microphone and pose a question. I saw one already posted in the chat a little bit earlier on implications for real estate, given that with COVID, there's a huge amount of real estate that's been sitting empty. So I was going to quickly jump into that. I see some others have raised some hands. On the real estate question, one of the things that always predicts a good successful platform is maybe the capacity to tap into spare resources. You can think, for example, Airbnb is tapping, the spare guest bedroom that's used twice a week. Only 2 weeks out of an entire 52-week year, or before Uber, your own personal car might only be used for 2 hours a day as opposed to 100% of the time. So spare capacity is a good predictor. Good examples of companies that are doing that are Comfy, coming out of California, is a really good one, where they're actually increasing the productivity. Folks, they're adding lots of sensors to actually manage the real estate and bring folks in and boost team productivity. Another one, my favorite example is actually ZBJ. Zubajie is a marketplace in China that has actually done what WeWork should have done. They got complementarity between the online labor market and the physical space. So they've used the spare capacity in cities to actually create work centers and then drive projects to online projects to offline physical locations. So it's a fantastic example of getting complementarity, and I think actually that is exactly the right model for tapping into some of the real estate. I think Nicholas, you had your hand up, so why don't you unmute and fire away.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, this is Nicholas from Karlsruhe, Germany. Thanks for the presentation, and I have a question with regards to making companies aware of the fact that they need some platform expertise, because I know it, or I saw it in the with agile methodologies and everything around that. It took quite a while until companies realized that they really need people that understand that topic properly. What is your recommendation to really make companies aware of the fact that platform expertise is definitely needed within the company?
Nicholas, I'll take first swing, and I'll also kind of try to address Dan's question about how do you convince incumbent monolith verticals to shift to a horizontal strategy, because I think they're very related questions. So, and yours kind of dovetails. So first, how do you make them aware? Mostly people will change strategy when they're afraid, when they're losing money, when their margins are going down, when they discover that they're losing influence in the market. So that's a lot of external forces. But we also find that we get a lot of pull from leadership teams. They've read materials. They say, hey, we can do that. We have all the resources that these other firms do. We have, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users of our traditional services. Why can't we do these things? And Nicholas, then this dovetails to that question. So they think that they understand a platform, but of course, platform has a whole set of uses, especially in vertical incumbent organizations. It generally will be viewed as a technology platform, sort of a horizontal stack of or layer of technology that you can build on top of. It takes quite a bit of effort to try to sort of align an organization around how do you start to think about platform in the context of, say, a network effect or mobilizing an external resource. And then probably the hardest part is around the kind of measurements that you would put in place. A lot of what we talk about in launching platforms are non-traditional measurements. They're around sort of the growth of user base. They're around things about engagement. They're around sort of the ease of which you can build new services or products and deploy them against your existing systems. And then where do those systems arise from? Are they just being done internally or externally? And so if you can kind of convince the senior management teams that, hey, the way that we normally run our business tends to be pretty finance centric. And I came out of a finance background for GE many years ago. Those don't really work when you're trying to do these other types of efforts around mobilizing ecosystems and user bases, and then looking at the efficiency with which you can start to build new services. So I think that it's sort of it's a discovery exploration where they realize that they're stubbing their toes, and then that's the opportunity.
A comment. But it's hard to know what motivates a company to do what or not. But one thing that we can say definitively is that we've seen patterns that are more likely to yield success in some companies than in others. So we didn't talk about it yet in this discussion, but a number of companies have clearly made a commitment to what we can consider programmatic platform hiring, and that is actually looking systematically through their organization in terms of what skill sets they need versus just hiring one or two superstars that they think that they can drive. So the point here is that if you're really serious about moving to a platform strategy, it isn't sufficient to just to hire one or two expert in the organization. You really need to launch a program that is probably multi-year and will involve multiple hires. And we're seeing some companies that pop up in the jobs data where they will be hiring 25 or more platform professionals at a time. And so our view is that those companies are probably much more likely to be successful and constantly, especially these large organizations. We mentioned JP Morgan, their IT spend is $9.2 billion a year. You're not going to have any impact if you're just hiring one or two platform professionals. And so you see a company like JP Morgan actually hiring up to 60 people a year with platform expertise. And so it's you got to have momentum both on the technology side, but also on the talent side.
Great, great.
Let me jump in quickly. I'm going to give a quick answer to Nick and then move to some other questions because we only have 10 minutes left. A quick thought, Nick. Let me give you one or two very short answers and move to one or two more. One, scare the crap out of them. In any marketplace where products complete with platforms always win. Simple way to think about it is platforms appreciate in value because of network effects, where products depreciate in value. Basically, the test there is how easy is it to create an inverted firm? That is, how easy is it for third parties to create value? Really easy to do with rides, tweets, stays, but it's also possible in B2B context. So one, scare the crap out of them. And again, look at the market value relative to employees, market value relative to capital. It's a huge difference. And the platforms almost always win in there. In the question section, we also had an example about supermarkets tapping into, with COVID, they're tapping into existing platforms for delivery. And then what's the likelihood they'll be able to make the transition and shift over to become platforms themselves? My own speculation is that's going to be hard. My suspicion is you wouldn't necessarily go to the Stop and Shop platform or the Safeway platform. You're more likely to go to something that's more general, more often service oriented. Had they done this 5 years ago or pre-COVID, they might have succeeded and become the place to do that. But I think the specialty platforms are becoming too small. I'll give you another version of this. Apple is now trying to create plugins such that anyone can create these micro apps on top. So you'd like to be able to get dinner reservation for any restaurant as opposed to one down the street. There just isn't sufficient density to do that. And I suspect the same is going to be true on supermarkets. My prediction is that they're going to be doomed to be partners on top of a platform. Very hard for them to become platforms themselves. Next question was on private. There are lots of private sector examples. What about public sector, especially about moving into complex domains like health? For what it's worth, we will be launching research campaigns on city as platform. It's another way to do that, moving into the public sector. I think some of those are really interesting. And then also a lot of work on fake news and other elements with public interest. With respect to health itself, it's interesting to borrow insights from folks like Jack Ma. Jack Ma launched Alibaba, the government taking him out of the picture aside. When he launched, he did some really brilliant insights in using platforms to solve social problems. They did this in finance, they did this in e-commerce, they're doing it in health. Look what's happening in the United States. Amazon is moving into health. Jeff Bezos has this wonderful quote, "Your profit is my opportunity." And there's so much profit margin and waste in health. I expect the private systems will be moving in, especially in the health ecosystem, partly because of their ability to handle complexity in ways that governments have not tackled them so far. To give you another version of this, Drizzly, the platform that actually will deliver booze to you, has done a fantastic job of navigating the multi-tier structure for alcohol distribution with each of the different legal regimes in different states. They've navigated that complexity in a way that creates a competitive advantage. So the ability to handle that complexity is something that some platforms absorb and then successfully build out their platforms. So I've spoken for a couple minutes. Let me make sure there are a couple other opportunities for other questions or other people to jump in. So I think there are going to be more opportunities for governments to do this, but I think the handling complexity is going to be one of the things that some of the private firms are most likely to do.
Hey, Marshall, thank you for that. Super, super interesting. I'd love to have you hold on to the mic for just one more question, and then I'm going to transition it over to Geoff for the final question and our wrap up here. But Marshall, one of your former students, Sam, wrote in a great question, old dog, new trick, right? I'm tapping into a B2B platform white space, and I used your decision tree to identify the platform opportunities. Super helpful. So the result is a federated platform. How can I approach convincing the incumbent to participate? Who is the incumbent is a crucial a collaborator to tip the market. You have any recommendations for Sam?
That's a wonderful and hard question. Now, the part of the issue is there's, if you can find it, there's a really wonderful short article by the former chief strategy officer of Alibaba on the 3 paradoxes of platforms. And as you're launching, often the big players don't need you, but the small players don't necessarily have the resources you need. His recommendation is often to try to grow with the smaller players who create coalitions that are themselves bigger than the incumbent players. If you can convince the incumbent player to join you and share the governance model, hallelujah, that's a very good thing to do. The ways to try to do that are typically to offer them a new slice of a market or a new technology or a new community that they wouldn't have access to on their own. What's the novel? The niche that you're going to go out and say, this is something you're really going to be able to add value for them. Absent that, the thing to then do is to actually look at coalitions of 2, 3, 4, and 5 that you could put together to actually make that work. To give you a little bit of history, if you take a look at what happened in credit cards, fantastic evolution of exactly what you're talking about. It started with Bank of America launching its own credit card. Then MasterCard put together a bank of 7 different, coalition of 7 banks to then compete with Bank of America. And they started to grow so fast, they took over. In response, Bank of America then went completely open and then created Visa with lots of different banks. So it was 1 firm, then 7 firms, then all firms. So we got Bank of America, MasterCard, then Visa as the evolution. So if you can carve out a specialized niche, you may be able to convince them and then grow from that niche. Or if you can't do that, then the trick would be to create a coalition of the next tier players in order to build that out. That's the way to succeed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marshall. Okay, I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, so we're like that baseball player sliding into home plate here. One final question, and then we'll wrap it up and follow up with you offline. But Geoff, this question over to you. Where are you seeing the most significant intersections between our work and that of the leaders in strategic workforce planning?
So it's interesting that you'd mentioned that, because I think that the foundations are starting to get involved on exactly that issue. So for example, I'm part of a Sloan Foundation working group on future of work that's really looking at how do the platforms change work roles, and in particular, are they making the labor force sort of less secure or more, and where are the opportunities? So that's I think a really important question, because there's a lot of focus on that, you know, with contingent labor, with sort of 1099 instead of W-2. And I think as sort of observers and participants, it's our job to kind of think through, well, not just pointing fingers and say bad, 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 but where are the opportunities also to actually improve the situation? Where can training be offered? Where can you do income smoothing? How can you do better sort of matching? And so that's an effort that, you know, as a community, we're directly involved in. And I'd say that sort of goes across labor economists, sort of workforce planners, government officials. So I think you're going to see a lot more focus on that, Diane, and you'll see future of work initiatives sort of popping up really across the university and government space.
Agreed. This is going to be an exciting year, and once again, it's shaping up to be the year of the platform and the platform professionals. So stay tuned to our digital channels, please. Thank you so much for a great discussion today, and please join us again on February 10th. Thanks, everyone.